why Assassin's Creed Origins is better than you remember. Hey everyone! Today, I want to talk about a game that I genuinely believe deserves a lot more appreciation than it gets today. And that's Assassin's Creed Origins. Whenever people discuss the greatest Assassin's Creed games, the conversation almost always revolves around titles like Assassin's Creed 2, Black Flag, or Unity. More recently, many players also bring up Odyssey and Valhalla because of their massive open worlds and RPG mechanics. But somewhere along the way, Origins slowly disappeared from these discussions, and I honestly think that's unfair. The interesting thing is that Origins wasn't just another Assassin's Creed game. It completely changed the direction of the franchise. Ubisoft took a huge risk by stepping away from the traditional formula that fans had known for almost a decade and introduced a much larger open-world, RPG progression, and an entirely new combat system. At launch, that decision divided the community because many longtime fans weren't ready for such a drastic change. However, now that several years have passed and we've experienced Odyssey, Valhalla, Mirage, and even Shadows, I think it's finally possible to look back at Origins without comparing it to the older games and instead judge it for what it actually achieved. One of the biggest reasons I believe Origins has aged so well is its world. Even in 2026, ancient Egypt remains one of the most immersive open worlds Ubisoft has ever created. It's not simply because the graphics still look impressive, although they certainly do. What makes Egypt so memorable is the atmosphere that surrounds you wherever you go. Whether you're exploring the busy streets of Alexandria, sailing along the Nile, climbing the Great Pyramid of Giza, or riding your camel through endless deserts during sunset, the world constantly gives you the feeling that you're exploring a real place with its own history and culture. What I appreciate even more is how Ubisoft designed the environment. Instead of filling every corner of the map with repetitive activities, they focused on making exploration feel rewarding. Sometimes you'll discover an ancient tomb hidden beneath the sand, while other times you'll come across forgotten temples or mysterious ruins that aren't even part of the main story. The game never forces you to explore these places, but it naturally makes you curious enough to leave the main quest behind and see what's waiting over the next hill. That's something many modern open-world games struggle to achieve because they often rely too heavily on map markers instead of encouraging genuine exploration. Another reason Origins continues to stand out is Bayek himself. Personally, I think Bayek is one of the strongest protagonists Ubisoft has ever written. He isn't memorable because he's constantly making jokes or delivering dramatic one-liners. Instead, he's memorable because he feels like an actual human being dealing with grief, anger, and responsibility. Throughout the story, you can clearly see that every decision he makes is influenced by the tragedy of losing his son, and that emotional weight never disappears from his character. His journey isn't simply about revenge. It's about finding justice while slowly becoming the person who helps build what eventually becomes the Assassin Brotherhood. A huge part of that emotional connection comes from Abubakar Salim's incredible voice performance. Whenever Bayek speaks, you can hear genuine pain, compassion, and determination in his voice. Whether he's comforting innocent people, confronting powerful enemies, or sharing emotional moments with Aya, his performance makes every conversation feel believable. Even years later, I still consider Bayek one of the few Assassin's Creed protagonists whose emotions feel completely authentic from beginning to end. Of course, no discussion about Origins would be complete without talking about its combat system, because this was probably the biggest change Ubisoft introduced. Earlier Assassin's Creed games relied heavily on counter-based combat where, after learning the timing, players could defeat dozens of enemies without much difficulty. Origins completely abandoned that system and replaced it with combat that required dodging attacks, choosing the right weapons, managing your positioning, and paying attention to enemy levels. At launch, many fans disliked this direction because it felt so different from what Assassin's Creed had always been. Looking back today, however, I think Ubisoft made the right decision because the older combat system had started to become repetitive. Origins made every fight feel more engaging, and for the first time in years, enemies actually felt dangerous instead of simply waiting for you to press the counter button. That doesn't mean Origins is a perfect game. The leveling system can occasionally interrupt the pacing by encouraging players to complete side content before progressing through the main story. And I completely understand why some fans still dislike that design choice. However, Compared to Odyssey and Valhalla, I think Origins strikes a much better balance between traditional Assassin's Creed gameplay and RPG mechanics. The role-playing elements add depth to the experience without completely overshadowing the core identity of the series, which is why many players who revisit the game today find themselves enjoying it far more than they did during its original release.